welcome to the first edition of the 2023 Bombercast for BigFooty Essendon Bombers. I'm your co-host, The Grizz, back for another season with my other co-host and good friend, Bonta34. It's been a long pre-season for us, Bont, prepping for the podcast, but it's finally good to get on board.
Yeah, it's actually really funny because I don't use the laptop that I'm using for the podcast. I actually don't use it all that often. So when I went to turn it on, it was so flat that it didn't even have enough power to tell me it needed battery. And when I tried to start everything up, it freaked out because the clock on the system was set for Christmas Day, amusingly, which must be the last time it managed to have a little skerrick of power. So it was telling me, because it actually wasn't Christmas, that my laptop was wrong and therefore I needed to update the date. So it has been a very long time since we've got together to talk about the Essendon Football Club.
Yes, and I think thankfully, unlike the 3 months prior to Christmas, which was an absolute crap show, this last 3 months has been relatively quiet. Preseason's come and gone. We've had a couple of matches, if you can call the Gold Coast practice sim, whatever that was, a match. It's been a weird old preseason. We've had the almost annual stringer, is he fit, is he not? We've had the now seemingly annual, is Cox and Reid ever going to play football again? But on top of that, it's been a season with a lot. It's been pretty quiet, I think, Bonds. But what's your general feel for the preseason been so far?
Yeah, it's been pretty good for us, I think. We haven't had any players come out and admit to taking illicit substances, which is not something that all clubs in the AFL can say. So I think we're ahead in that regard. But yeah, it has been pretty quiet. And I think as a football club, we needed it to be quiet. I think with all the turmoil we saw towards the end of the year with Truck and with the board and with Hurd and Sheedy and all that going on, I think if that had carried on into early 2023, I think most of us would be fatigued already. And you know, we're potentially going to have a long season. So if we were fatigued in March, geez, we'd be, I don't know what we would have been, come July or August.
Yeah, and I think it's been quiet for a few fronts. The first is we've heard basically nothing out of the club, really. Generally, you see a lot of puff pieces out. And we're starting to get a few now. I think Ayrton Woolley released the first chapter of his book on the Essendon website about a week ago. That might be the longest article I've ever read. Just about. But all in all, it's been pretty quiet. A lot of playing down of expectations from Brad Scott, which I don't mind. He did say that he was surprised by the quality of the group as opposed to what he thought it would be coming in so far, but really playing down expectations for what he expects of the year. And I think we've got a very young group, really, that's only gotten younger, from last year. And my general feel of the preseason is not to expect much for this season. Not that we expected much either of us last year, and we were proven to be right.
Yeah, I think Brad Scott's sort of got to say that he thinks the squad is better than what he expected coming in, because I think if he came in and said it was about what he expected or below what he expected, then we'd be questioning whether or not he's the man for the job. The knives would already starting to come out, as they do amongst the Essendon fan base. You did touch on the stringer thing, whether or not he's fit. I say it every season when that comes up, and I'll say it again. It's the most ridiculous topic to have about player fitness at AFL level. The reality is they have set that many metrics. Even if he does look a little bit bigger than, say, I don't know, Zach Merritt around the stomach, he's still going to be 10 times fitter than anybody than the layman. So it's just ridiculous that we have this chat about players, especially someone like Jake, who is not going to be an elite runner. He's never going to be that elite 10Ks in a game at top speed runner. He's a burst player, and burst players don't need to be these thin rakes. Although there has been a couple of photos today of him come out. It does look incredibly fit, which I know it hasn't actually managed to get much traction amongst the fan base yet.
Yeah, I generally don't buy they're fitter than the layman thing, because it's sort of their job. My job doesn't revolve around being a professional athlete. So of course he's going to be more than 10 times fitter than me. My thing with Jake has always been, I don't care whether you come to preseason, ripping Nick, shredded six pack. Just don't come back overweight. And he's clearly the sort of guy that I think we've realised now that needs to build into fitness over the course of preseason. Every time we try and build him up into this machine that can run 12 kilometers in the game as a midfielder, he breaks down. I've had this discussion with Ant and Vanders, I think, on the board, where I think we just need to see if we can strip him down to 90 kilo. I don't care about him being ripped. I don't care about him having a six pack, but clearly he gets to a critical weight where his body starts to break down because of his gait. And we saw it. Like, I don't care if he's, a little pudgy around the midriff, but I think he's had 2 or 3 soft tissues this preseason, which is just never ideal going into a season.
Yeah, well, when I talk about he's fitter than the layman thing, what I simply mean is I think a lot of people think how they would react to not being in top nick. So if you or I aren't in top nick, then we feel it. If an AFL player's not in top nick, they're still pretty bloody good. So it's not like. Yeah, it's a hard one to sort of explain, but I just think people look at it and go, oh, geez, if I was carrying 5 or 6 extra kegs, geez, I'd be struggling. An AFL player carries 5 or 6 extra kegs, yeah, they might be struggling, but I still think they're able to go out and do their job. So I just that's what I mean by he's still going to be fitter than layman in that being that little bit heavier probably doesn't impact him as much as it would anybody else. The other one, of course, was Tip and Woody. There was a lot of talk about whether or not he'd get fit, and I think there was a Carlton post that keeps coming onto our board for whatever reason, and he suggested that Tipper wouldn't be able to get fit enough until round 10. Ridiculous. He's got 16 weeks as an AFL player to get fit. Tipper doesn't need, again, he's not an average person. He doesn't need 16 weeks and then 10 rounds of the season to get fit. He's going to be able to get fit in that 16-week time because, as you said, it's their job. It's what they do day in, day out. So, the whole concern about, are they going to get fit? Are they going to get fit in time? The club will have had fitness plans. They'll have had dietary plans. They'll have had it all set up to get them absolutely cherry ripe for round 1. Now, soft tissue injuries happen, and it means you can't get everyone fit, and that's fine. But any concerns about this whole dieting or turning up to preseason or anything like that, yeah, it sucks if they start behind the 8 ball, but it's not like they can't make it up. And then 9 times out of 10, they inevitably do.
Yeah, I think with Jake and Tipper specifically, I think with Jake, he was always going to put a little bit of weight on because his injury was lower body, so you can't run. It's very hard to get. Yeah, we've seen multiple guys have injuries to the lower half, and because they can't run and they can't do all that sort of fitness with their lower bodies, such as strengthening quads and stuff. Essentially, what you're doing is you're going to put on a little bit of weight. But I think with Tipper, it was always just going to be a long road. He was gone for 6 months, and now he's trying to get back into AFL shape. I still think even if he doesn't look fit, he'll probably be, but I'm not expecting much from either of them in the first couple of rounds. Not that it matters because I don't think we're in a position where we absolutely need them fit and firing to make finals, and we've got a pretty soft draw to start the first 4 weeks, so it doesn't matter. But we'll move to the practice matches, or if we can call them that, of the last couple weeks. We had the 6-period sim against the Gold Coast, and we had the preseason match against St Kilda. We're going to have a couple of big takeaways each, and I think I might give you the new ball. What's one of the big takeaways you've seen from the 2 practice matches so far?
Well, I don't think we can really call the Gold Coast game a practice game because you did say it was 6 periods, but we actually called it off after 5 because of I think they decided it was too hot up there. There was a rumor spread by Cooper Gresh that we called off the 6th period because we wanted to have the victory after 5 periods and we didn't want to lose the game. That was his theory. It's an interesting theory considering the Gold Coast called it off, and his theory was that we were going to lose the game, which the 6th period never got played. So I don't know how he came to that conclusion. If I had to sort of pick a big takeaway from the preseason game against St Kilda, it would probably be how good our small forward pressure was when the ball hit the deck. John Menzies, Alwyn Davey Jr., depends on what you want to call him. I'll probably just call him Alwyn Davey because it's shorter and sharper for me. And then obviously Tip and Woody, they do just bring a different level of speed to that forward line pressure than what we had last year. And I think we said it multiple times when we were defending poor Truck in that, Truck sort of got left with not a great small forward line and not much going on when the ball hit the deck. I mean, you had Dev Smith down there who was okay, but wasn't the player he once was. You had Tex Wanganeen bob up every now and then who, just clearly wasn't ready for AFL level last year. Yeah, so I think those three this year for Brad Scott will be very, very handy and will cause nightmares for teams at times.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because Will Snelling was a healthy scratch. So it's fascinating. I found with Mac Guelphy out, Will Snelling was healthy but not playing, and in his stead, as you said, was Tipper, Jai Menzie, and Owen David. Now it might be that he thought Snelling is a proven player. What we needed to find out is what we have with the other three, which is fair enough. But I think Owen Davey was a really pleasant surprise, and we'll get into players that impressed us a bit later, I think. But Jai Menzies another one that's really popped for me this preseason. He kicked 3 against the Gold Coast in that match simulation. I think, like I said with Truck, the game plan that we want to play, this forward half football, relies so heavily on forward pressure. And when you've got an undersized defence like we do, you need heat on the ball coming out of our forward 50 out of their defensive 50 so we can set up a zone in order to intercept, because we're not going to beat many teams one-on-one with the defence that we're setting out there. So I found, I'm with you, the small forwards sort of looking coherent was a big one. One big takeaway I had was our defensive setup. I was really keen to see what Brad Scott was going to do. A lot of talk about how the players were sort of really regimented last year, Zach Merritt said, which seemed weird because against John Worsfold, they said they wanted to be coached more and have a definite system, and then they get into a definite system and it's too rigid. I don't know what's going on there, but really positive against St Kilda is that we only allowed, I think it was Happy Skerritt had the fact, I think we only allowed the Saints to transition the ball from our forward 50 to their forward 50 twice directly. So that's without a stoppage or something or an intercept in between, which, that was the hallmark of our game last year, was just letting teams waltz from one side down to the other. So when you consider the breeze that game was working with, that's a fair effort. Now, I think we're going to struggle to score points this year, but I think you could see that the setup we had with that forward pressure that you mentioned might at least be an improvement, which, may not be much considering the last couple of years.
The only thing I will say, and I was positive about their pressure, was that the small forwards, unfortunately, didn't really get involved a great deal on the scoreboard. So, Owen Davey was involved with four score involvements, which is pretty good for him. Jai Menzies only had the 2. Tipper was only 1 score involvement. So defensively, they were really good, but we do need to find something from them the other way, other than I think Owen kicked 1 and Jai and Tipper had a shot each. Owen put 1 out in the full as well, which was disappointing, but probably not too unexpected considering the conditions.
No, that's right. Did you have another one that you wanted to throw out there, Bonds?
I think the other thing I was probably pleased to see was there were players in their correct positions. So I'm a big fan of Andy McGrath behind the ball, which I thought we did well. I'm a big fan of Perkins going onto the ball and being that mid-half forward, which I know some people don't like, but I quite liked, and we did that with him. Merritt sort of plays that really good role on the ball, can slide behind it. We played him there. Peter Wright played for. Wiedemann is going to be handy up forward and can, part-time ruck up there, and we did that with him. Apart from probably Kane Baldwin, who I think we're playing out of position, and we can and I'll probably touch on that later. I thought we played people in their positions. We played players to their strengths rather than trying to shoehorn people into spots, which we are guilty of doing in previous years.
Yeah, I think Baldwin was more out of necessity than anything, considering we've got a couple of injuries to Cox and Reed, who just aren't playing at the moment. So finding an additional key defender for a couple of quarters in the practice matches was required. But yeah, I sort of don't know what position some of the forward half guys are meant to play. Like, is Perkins a mid or a forward? Is Langford a forward or a wing? Is Martin wing, half forward or a midfield? But what I appreciate is a bit like, to your point, the fits looked a lot more natural. We weren't shoehorning Kyle Langford into the big-bodied midfield role because we didn't have anyone else to play it. We weren't having Massimo play small forward because we had no other options, as you alluded to earlier. And roles that I think Zach Merritt talked about wanting to play on instinct a bit more around the ground. They were sort of frozen about what they were meant to be doing and what they were doing last year, that there was no instinct. Again, I'm not sure how that flies, but you could tell they're playing in a position which suited how they wanted to play. And so, that could just be the first phase of Brad Scott trying to figure out what they have. But I did notice that too, that it did look a more natural setup all across the ground. And I think when you've got Dirk Thatcher, for example, playing as a key defender, Laverty playing second tall, and Ridley playing the rebound defence, I think everyone just slotted into their roles easier. And I think, to your point, it's good to see everyone playing well. My last takeaway is I think we've got another year of goal kicking woe ahead of us. So I floated this last pre-season when we kicked terribly in both matches against the Bulldogs and against St Kilda, I think it was. And no one was particularly worried on the board until we finished second worst in the AFL for goal kicking last year. We were absolutely dreadful. It absolutely cost us a couple of games against the West Coast, and I think another one against the Collingwood, when Jones hit the post and we missed a whole bunch of shots in that last quarter. We kicked 3-14 against St Kilda, and we weren't much more accurate against the Gold Coast. And I think we lack scoring power to begin with, but I think the goal kicking can't afford to be what it has been this preseason and what it was really from last year.
Yeah, it's a tough one because St Kilda didn't have the inaccuracy we had. And can I just say, as a side note, some of the comments on the board were laughable about, they train here. They train in this win. That's why they're a better shot for goal. So it doesn't matter. I mean, give me a break. Have they been to Tullamarine? Has anyone who said that actually ever been to Tullamarine? It's not like it's a calm and tranquil place. It gets windy out there. It's tough conditions out there. And it's 2023. They're professional footballers. It's not the early 90s where Sheets could tie down the windsock and that'd confuse the opposition and they wouldn't know how to respond. We should have been better kicking into that wind. We should have been better kicking with the wind for goal as well. So I take your point that the kicking for goal was poor. I think part of the problem when we had the breeze was that we were rushing. I think the players panicked. They went, shit, we've got this really strong breeze. We need to kick 5 or 6 goals with it. And so instead of being smart with the ball, we were just bombing it long or just taking really poor shot choices. So I sort of look at it and go, was our goal kicking terrible? Yes, but there were circumstances in it, in that fact that I think the pressure just got to the players with the idea that we needed to slam quick goals through because of this amazing breeze we had, which we won't see at Docklands, obviously. But yeah, it's a tough one because they are professional footballers, so that shouldn't have happened, but it did. So, yeah, I agree that goal kicking needs to improve this year from last year. Having Tip and Woody back will definitely do that because, as we know, he's a bit of a dead-eyed dick in front.
Yeah, and I think Essendon and St Kilda played with the same breeze. So the fact St Kilda were, and if it was a little bit of a discrepancy, that would make a difference. But 10-7 to 3-14 is ridiculous. And the struggle for me was like we were missing the same way continually. It wasn't like, okay, so that's what the wind's doing. I'm going to adjust my kick. We were missing it left every single time down that end. It was driving me nuts that no one adapted to the wind and just decided to hang it out halfway through the last goal, the right side goal post, and let it fade. Anyway, all in all, we're not going to be good enough to let opportunities slip, and I feel like we're doing that at the moment. Speaking of forward line, I wanted to talk about players that stood out and players that might have us scratching our heads before we wrap up the podcast. One for me was Alan Davey, and I know we've already sort of talked about him, and I thought he was pretty good, and we can talk about him in a second. But the one I wanted to highlight was Sam Wiedemann. Now, Sam wasn't shooting the lights out as a key forward, but I thought he absolutely outplayed Harry Jones, who was probably his contemporary or the guy, if String is fit, he's competing for a spot with. And then I think he probably outperformed Peter Wright as well. I'm not, he didn't kick a bag of 7 in each game, but there's a guy that could play as a complement to Peter Wright and chop out in the ruck as needed. I thought he probably cemented his spot in round 1 for us.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by how he played. Harry Jones, to be honest, I didn't think moved all that well.
No.
He looked like Cale Hooker, which is not a positive considering that he looked like Cale Hooker towards the back end of his career the way he was moving. So I think Harry, to me, just didn't look like he'd been playing enough footy. There's a couple of times there where he ran and jumped. He sort of got robbed a couple of times. He took a couple of great marks, and it either was a free kick or something, or either for or against, and he had to hand the ball over. So those kind of marks didn't really get replayed, which, if he'd been paid the mark and not the free kick in completely unrelated to him, he would have got replayed. We'd probably be saying that he looked pretty good in his first game back. The reality is, at the end of the day, it sort of went against him a little bit. Does he play round 1 instead of Wiedemann? At the moment, you'd probably play Wiedemann because I don't really want Harry in the ruck. I don't want Peter Wright in the ruck, even though he did ruck a bit more during the practice game than I would have liked. So, yeah, it's tough. I don't think Wiedemann or Harry Jones are going to be competing with Stringer. I think that Jake is just going to be a completely different player. And I think he will take someone's spot. Like, even though as you said, he was a healthy scratch. If it comes down to Jake Stringer or Will Snelling, then Will Snelling misses out. I think that's the kind of player Jake's competing with. I don't think Wiedemann or Jones are going to be too worried about Jake coming in and taking their role. But yeah, at the moment, I'd probably be playing Wiedemann instead of Jones, which pains me to say. I would ideally like to be playing Baldwin, but as I said, they seem to be persisting with him in the backline idea, which, it's a very Essendon thing to try and create a swing player. I get what you're saying about it's through necessity. We've had injuries, but the bloke who's only played 1 season as a key position forward and looked okay last year in the VFL, it's his first year back in 2 years. Why are we swinging him now? It feels very Aaron Francis to me, in that we just never we fell in love with this idea of swinging him around, and we never let him get settled. And I just really hope that you're right, and it was just purely because of injuries. Because the thing is, Kane didn't come on until late in the game, so we obviously could afford to not have him down back if we played in the first 3 quarters without him. And I get that he played the VFL in the morning, but and again, I'll be honest, I don't like this idea of swinging him in the VFL because the VFL is meant to be about development. So if we need a key position back in the VFL, go to the Amateur Football Association and grab someone from there. Grab a key position defender from there. Don't start swinging these young blokes around. Let them play the positions that we drafted and they look most natural in. Having said that, Kane played very well as a backman and provided plenty of run and overlap, which completely surprised me. I was stunned by that. I'm not sure if it got picked up because, again, similar to Harry with his marks where he had things taken away from him, they didn't use Kane. So I don't think it really got noticed all that much. Whereas if the couple of times when he actually provided that run and overlap, if they'd been smart and used him, we'd be talking about what a find Kane Baldwin has been as a defender. Yeah. But again, it didn't happen, so we're really not. But yeah, I'm just it's a very Essendon thing to try and find a swing player because we had such good ones in Hooker, to a lesser extent Hurley. So I think we're still in love with that idea. It's sort of like the Australian cricket team trying to find the Freddie Flintoff equivalent. Yeah. We fall in love with an idea even if the player doesn't quite match the description.
Yeah, I would tend to think that it's more out of necessity at the moment. Lewis Hayes just isn't ready because his body isn't ready, and Cox and Reid aren't playing. Kane Baldwin wasn't really part of my consideration, other than he looked okay when he came on. But yeah, my thing with Jones is he's 4 preseasons in, and he still looks like he got drafted yesterday. Like, he's still so skinny. Bo Wilkie, who's technically 5 kilos lighter and 7 centimeters shorter, was pushing him under the ball. And he was. I have serious concerns about Harry Jones going forward as an AFL standard player. If there's one guy I'd be trying back, it'd be Harry Jones over Kane Baldwin. But that's a debate for another day. Will Setterfield, I think. Well, let's just talk about the midfield mix generally, good and bad at the moment, because I think Will Setterfield stood up in a way where he was very different to the rest of our mids in his contested possession winning. I thought he looked great. He attacked the ball. He tackled really well. I thought Jai Caldwell tackled well as well before he did his ankle. Whereas I think a couple of the senior mids really let us down, namely Shield and Parrish, with their physicality on the weekend. And Parrish particularly. I'm normally a defender of Parrish. I think he's a very talented player. But I really just hope that was blowing the cobwebs out against St Kilda, because he looked disinterested.
He did look disinterested. Amusingly, he still was equal second for tackles for the game. Merritt, Setterfield, and Menzies all had 6, and then Parrish, he's standalone second. Parrish had 4, and nobody else had more. So it's funny in that I think that sort of probably tells you that the tackle stat is not the be all and end all in terms of physicality, because he did look disinterested. I'm not too stressed about it though. I feel like Darcy's one of those blokes that he'd be smarting after that performance. He really would be thinking to himself, could have done more. And so I feel like we'll just wait and see. I think round 1, him and Merritt will probably rack up the 30 touches again, and away we go. Setterfield was good. I don't think he was as good as advertised at the moment. I think there's a lot of desire for him to be good. So it's tough because you're right, his physicality was really good. He tackled a lot. He did everything right in that sense. But his disposal efficiency was at 60%. Now, I get disposal efficiency is not the best stat, and a lot of people think it can be overrated. But when you have 25 touches and 14 of those are handballs, I look at that and go, how did you only get 60% disposal efficiency? You've got to be able to use the ball better than that. If you're going to go in there and have like as I said, you go in there and 66% of your possessions are handballs, your disposal efficiency can't be 60%. It just can't be. It has to be higher. So he did really well to get the ball. He was physical, but if he's going to butcher it, is he much worth to us? Is he really worth having in the side if he's going to be physical, get the ball, and then hand it straight over?
Yeah, I suppose that was a knock on him. You got him cheap for a reason, didn't you? Like, he didn't fit into the Carlton midfield because they're already stacked inside, which is probably the main reason. But the other one was there was always a knock on his disposal, even at under 18s. That was more by foot though. Again, by hand, I think I'd have to watch it back again. I didn't think he was that bad by hand. I thought by foot he missed quite a few targets, which again was not surprising because that's why you got him cheap. But yeah, I suppose
look, he might be someone. He's probably somebody, to be honest, that's exemplified by that win. As I said, needs to be an AFL player, should be able to adapt. But the reality is his kicking's not great. So he's probably the exception to the rule in that he's not going to be able to adapt. We know his kicking's not great already. Therefore, that win, it's just going to be pretty terrible. So, I as I said, I'm probably going to give him a pass purely because he's got a poor football. And he's not poor by foot. He's average by foot. Average players find it really hard to fix that up in that win. So I'm not stressing yet, even though last year I think I said he was the Dodoro special because, and Adrian wanted him when his draft year, didn't get him. Wanted him when he came from GWS, didn't get him. Third time lucky for him. But look, yeah. So I just think, even though I've probably been a little bit critical of him, again, we probably wait till round 1 because he definitely has to play round 1.
Yeah, I think he and Merritt have been our 2 best performed mids over the first 2 games. But I think our midfield mix will look very similar for the first 3 or 4 weeks of the year as it was last year, with the exception of Setterfield, just to see how it goes before we see any major changes. So if you're expecting Parrish or Shield to get kicked out of the rotation after a couple preseason matches, you're going to be disappointed. But the other thing with Parrish is 69% game time. So that could probably explain the numbers as well. But there was just a distinct lack of sort of intensity there with him. And maybe he was just like, yeah, it's preseason. I'm a 7-year player. I don't need to wait till round one, but that's a dangerous game. And we can't afford to flick the switch because we're not that good. I suppose let's end on a positive note. Alan Davey, I think, is now a lock for round one. We've only got a few minutes left, but I just wanted to get the hype train going on Alan Davey. I thought he looked ready for round one. He was a spitting image of his uncle. Like, if you told me that was Aaron Davey running around, I would have believed you. That shot for goal went out on the full was terrible, but all in all, a real bright spot and a real find, I think, over the preseason, Alan Davey Jr.
Yeah, and I think everybody's now looking for your Keziah Pickett style impact in the first season. It used to be the case you go, oh, these small, skinny, small forwards, they won't do much for it the first year because they get pushed off the ball too easily. But there's been a few, and Keziah is just the most recent examples. He's the one I'm running with, where a skinny, small forward comes in, is able to just play AFL football purely based on their natural ability. And Owen David Jr. is definitely one of those players. He is just unbelievable. His positioning at the fall of the ball, how clean he is when he picked it up. He just looked like he's a ready-made AFL player. Disposal-wise, again, just needs to clean it up a little bit. But yeah, look, I think he's definitely going to be the best first-year player for us this year.
Yeah, I tend to think that around the ground disposals on Saturday or Friday night probably just need to be written off to some extent. But I was impressive with this tank. He was getting up and down the field. He was involved at halfback a couple of times, mopping up. And that was one of the big credits for him coming in was he was more than just a small forward. He was actually quite capable of pushing up the midfield and onto the wing. It's just good to have someone to look forward to have another Indigenous guy and a Davey name. Hopefully his brother, now that we haven't picked up anyone to the SSP, which is a bit surprising. It's something we haven't talked about. I suppose we haven't picked anyone up, so it's not worth talking about. His brother might be able to join him soon and be elevated off the longer-term injury list, which would be great. So that's probably just going to be us for this week. Next week, we're going to be doing a full round one end season pod. We'll be having predictions. We'll be having over and unders for what we think this year is going to be, and we might even have a guest if we're lucky. Bonds, it's been great to chat to you again. It's exciting to have another big year ahead for the Essendon Football Club, and one hopefully that's a little less eventful than last year's.
Yeah, it would be nice if we could just have a nice quiet year where we only focus about what's happening on the field.
No worries. All right, well, that will be us for this week. Thanks for listening, and make sure you pass it around to your friends and to other BigFooty Bomber fans, and we'll chat to you next week.